What's happening? Benton here, up in, where are we? Waterbury, Connecticut, I believe. Kind of a long day of trucking. Started later than normal, around what? I think around 5:30. Looks like we're driving all the way through the 14. Let's see. Let me check with the old GPS. When do we get to our truck stop destination? And we're speeding. Let's not do that. It says 4 hours and 43 minutes, 8 p.m. We're escaping a snowstorm that I checked the weather. I don't think it's going to make a difference, but if not for the weather, I most likely would have completed my 10-hour break there at the shipper, which is a regular customer of this trucking company that I allow to employ me as a contractor. And got unloaded early in Springfield, Massachusetts at a U.S. Postal Service distribution facility. It was Mother's Day displays, Hallmark Mother's Day displays. Nice light load there. And these are going to what I picked up for our regular customer. Now that I'm unloaded, is going to Chicago area. 3 drops, 1 in the Chicago area, 2 in Wisconsin. Unfortunately, this was a drop and hook, meaning some other driver dropped the trailer, and now we're into Northeast Connecticut. We're into the traffic. See, what I love about taking my break and then leaving about midnight is I miss all this bullshit. We're already heavily into the traffic. But once we get out of this, it should be cleared up. It's Saturday too, man. What the hell? Oh, that's right. So we got our weather coming in. Although these folks should be used to that. I believe that's tomorrow night. But either way, I guess if they're going to make anything of their weekend, do it now. Ah, yes, there's a chat. Maybe it won't be ruined. Shout out to the chat. We'll see how it goes. And I don't mean you fine folks. I mean the miscreants. If the miscreants show up and start miscreanting, I'm going to just turn it off. I ain't got time for that. But either way. And, there's something in trucking. There's a lot of things in trucking where, there's really no training. In fact, I realize now I've exacerbated the problem. I should have put some straps because I dropped an empty trailer in one of the doors and I failed. I did the exact same thing the previous driver did. It did not even occur to me to put straps in the trailer. And typically for long haul truckload, van truckload, sometimes we strap our own loads, and sometimes the shipper tells us, hey, throw some straps in the trailer, and then we forget half the time and have to get reminded. And then sometimes the receivers steal the straps for whatever reason on the other end. And next thing you know, I'm working for a company that's, got this customer freight. And, the way business is set up in America, there's really no mechanism or means to have a training or how about a little handbook? Here's what you do with this customer, right? Here's your checklist, right? Here's what you do in this scenario. Here's what you do in that scenario. And, there's already been I noticed there's already been some freight that's fallen over because I was not able to strap it myself. And I was in such a hurry. And I don't typically get in a hurry, but since I knew I was going to be extending my work day, my hope would have been to go to sleep and then take off about midnight. And with the weather incoming in the Midwest, not in the Northeast, but what's going to happen is I'm going to have to take a 10-hour break anyway. So leaving at this time, I just hit the road about 32 minutes ago. It's not going to make any difference. I'm going to hit the weather. And I would argue actually that my own ability, it's actually, I've done really good in some extreme weather recently. And a lot of that is driving overnight, leaving about midnight and being able to make a bunch of time when there's not a bunch of bozos on the road fucking everything up. And, I won't be starting out until 6 a.m. or later tomorrow. So, whatever weather's there, I'll be driving with the bozos for much of it. Might catch a couple of hours in the morning before people get out. And, I think a lot about, people want to have a proper society and all of these things, and it's just not possible, but as we know, but, look at how much, would be done and could be done otherwise. And, and then I'm already hit the road and I got because I sent pictures of the load and I've got the dispatch sending me messages about, well, make sure to strap this. And it's like, make sure to put some straps on some of that stuff. And like, well, yeah, I was able to on part of it, but then there's another part, there's some other stuff where there's just nowhere to strap it to that I can see. And, I don't load the trucks. And I said, well, next time I'm at the customer, I'll ask them, how do they do this? Because what I'm assuming is, and I don't want to get too descriptive with the freight, but if they have the straps when they're loading the truck, I think once they put the freight in there, really we lose the chance to put because it's like there's no room for me to maneuver the freight and it might weigh too much. It really has to be done when they're loading the truck, not later on. And, to constantly be put in potential bad situations. And at this point, the freight is likely damaged or it's not damaged or it's going to be fine. I don't fucking know. Now, I don't give a shit, meaning that's not my concern. Now, obviously, my concern would be avoiding it. If it's already happened, it's just like, we can argue about it later, or I'll just take an L and hopefully I won't have to pay for anything. But, and I do sort of lose my desire to do anything other than actually drive the truck, certainly, when such occurs. I think it's giving me heartburn. And, but yeah, I'd forgotten to sign the bills of lading. I grabbed the 3 bills of lading out of the trailer and hit the road and got about 5 miles down the road and realized, oh, fuck, I had to go back. And then, again, without getting too much into it, then I happened to notice, there's a Post-it note on one of the bills of lading, the page I sign and leave behind. It Says, please strap 2 sets of freight. No straps and trailer shipping department. It's like, yeah, I'll be happy to. Can I get a training course? And I'm being serious. I was like, I'm not being sarcastic. Can I get a training course? And it's just going to sound, I'm not being rude. I don't mean anything by this, but it's like, we don't expect the shipping department to know how to drive trucks. Why am I expected to know how to load and secure I mean, it's just, I'm not. And now this is the part of life where everybody wants to go, oh, it's common sense or it's this or it's that. It's like, well, okay, but do they just hire people day one and there's no training? And, there's got to be some sort of instruction given to these people who probably make a halfway decent wage, I'm assuming. It's not just forklift, slam the pallets into the trailer. I mean, it's, somewhat specialized parts and equipment from what I can tell. Nothing crazy expensive, but it ain't cheap either. But, and then it's funny because in the past I would have a lot of anxiety. If I fuck some shit up, I would end up having a lot of anxiety over it. And in this case, based on a lot of these spiritual topics, I mean, yes, if there's damage, it's unfortunate, but, I can't be too bothered about that, right? Are they going off yet? All right, y'all play nice down there. Well, I got my eyes on some of you. I'm trying to avoid moderating the chat. But yeah, it's, just how fraught with peril many of these undertakings are. And, it doesn't have to be this way. And why is it this way? Well, maximum corporate profits, of course. Maximum corporate profits. And then, I don't know what other drivers do, because the fact is there's a decent proportion of truckers that just don't give a fuck. And you can't make them give a fuck. And if you tell them to secure the freight, not only will they not secure the freight, they'll hope that the shit gets damaged. Right. I mean, this is a real thing, but I care at the level of I'd like to avoid it if possible, because, and companies do lose accounts. Imagine if this has happened, but I have no way of knowing. What if this has happened before and now that they're just like, all right, we're done with you, and would I want to even continue to work at a place where, I mean, imagine having that reputation. That's the guy that lost his whatever account, Now, it wouldn't be we were already on thin ice. It wouldn't be and again, this is a thought experiment, but, it wouldn't be hey, Benton, we're going to have you working on this account some of the time, and here's what you need to know. And, the first time you go there, we're going to have another driver sort of coach you up on what's expected. And of course, now you get into extra pay, you get into, we're trying to haul freight, how do you schedule that sort of time? How is a driver going to be available? Is somebody going to make a video series, right? Because when everybody's chasing the almighty dollar, there's just simply not, none of this is a thing, right? And what we see in trucking, of course, is that it's just always going to be blamed on. It won't even be blamed on me. It all rolls downhill onto the driver, right? And at this point, I'm not aiming to get fired, and I certainly wouldn't want the company to lose any accounts. But I don't know. Am I nuts? I don't think I am. They didn't ask me when I had a phone interview for this job. They didn't ask me how how good are you at freight securement and such? It's like, well, I'm kind of a bozo. If you're just expecting me to figure some shit out in the moment on my own, that may not be my forte, depending on what we're talking about, right? I don't know. I'm really fucking good at driving this truck in traffic and all sorts of weather conditions. Uh, Call me insane. I thought that was the majority of my job would be that. It's actually the majority of my job ends up being photographer and paper pusher to some extent, and soft skills, sort of socially engineering people at times, and maneuvering through these various facilities that are more dissimilar than similar in many ways. And then I understand the bootstrapping crowd is just like, well, let's suck it up. This is the way it is. And blah, blah, blah. Yes. Yeah, I understand that but is that just more of a, hey, shut the fuck up and quit bothering us? Quit bothering everybody else with these valid concerns, you know? There's rich people need to get richer. But then what if what if this freight is for a customer that's, it could be some version of a, they've got work for them, and, what if they has to have these components at a particular time and in working order. So yeah, Benton's really good at the part where we can drive through a snowstorm and deal with extreme weather and deal with traffic and not crash. And but it's the details like, I didn't manage to even get the straps in the trailer for next time because I haven't really even been told to do that. And you can say, well, it's common sense. Well, sure, but that doesn't mean that's how an individual's brain works. I mean, it's air quotes common sense on the back end as long as it doesn't become an issue. But is it important enough to be addressed proactively or not? I think that's the thing is it's simply not important enough. It's just not important enough. Business and trucking and, the fellow that owns this company, it's just, I think it's easier for everybody involved to just sort of let these things slide through the cracks. And it's that way industry wide, if that makes sense. And, am I becoming too critical now of the of American business? See? I do kind of notice what it is sometimes that causes people to leave the stream, but I don't even. It's a minor miracle. There's even this. It was double digits. Double digits is a minor miracle these days. I can remember times where it was much more than this, but that's okay. I'd say just about everybody's YouTube numbers are down to some extent. Certainly not too concerned with the so-called ego aspects of that. And thank you all for listening to my foolishness. Hey, Newtown, Sandy Hook, 1 mile. Yeah. Now, what I'm going to do at some point is if I'm physically capable of it, I'm going to do my best to secure the freight before it's unloaded and then hope for the best. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what else to do. I can't brood over that though. And people may not know, but some folks who listen to me over a period of years, I'm quite hard on myself in certain ways. Bit of a perfectionist, which seems quite silly in some regards, but And so I think some of that gets misdirected, or actually properly directed. Some of that, some of the brooding. My logical mind starts going, well, it shouldn't be this way in the first place. Absolutely, sir, and that's the justification for not brooding over it. So, uh, what is that? Your proverbial "don't cry over spilled milk"? Yeah, and high expectations for my own level of performance, certainly. And really, the only thing I've done wrong is letting myself get into a hurry. Because I know I took at least one turn a little quicker than I probably would have otherwise in hustling my way back from whence I came because I forgot to sign the bills. And I'm certainly capable of forgetting that. However, had I been in less of a hurry, I would have probably double checked before I left and said, okay, have I done everything? Most likely. And part of that was my own hurry around wanting to drive these 4.5 or what would have been 5 hours when I left. It's like, yeah, I'd like to be done for the day. I'm not trying to do too much driving after the sun goes down. Certainly it'll be down by 8 p.m. And then there's the strange phenomenon where, on the one hand, I'm seemingly paid fairly well. And then on the other hand, it's like way less than it should be. I think I should make around 2,500 a week, and I make 1,800, which is, I'm happy with the 1,800, but based on the amount of hours I'm likely to working 7 days a week, it turns out that that's fairly close to Illinois minimum wage, which is the state that the trucking company is based out of. So, like, yeah, well, what about a minimum wage job, but we'll give you a shit ton of hours? I mean, but you got to have like a special qualifications and level of experience, right? And so now we're into the waking dream, surrealistic unreality, deja vu all over again, the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. And virtually everything can be, brought to the level of transacting business transactions, financial transactions. And then, how much am I going to put into something that it may be completely fine? I would say it's 50-50 based on my knowledge of what these components are. Uh, well, I'd say it's a 65-35 or good, if that makes sense. There's about a 35% chance that something's kind of fucked up. Because I've noticed that, sometimes I assist in the unloading, and there's one time when hilariously with this one location got one part, and just me as a person. And again, I don't want to be too. I'm trying to keep this vague on purpose, but in physically carrying it to where it was going and sort of propping it up against the outside of a metal building, like I barely kind of scratched it. It's metal. I mean, we're talking about a metal component. I scratched it up a little bit. And then, so I don't know. I mean, does it have to be pristine? Like, and this is part of the perfectionism. This is part of the, my own attention to detail. Like, I don't install this stuff. I have no fucking idea. What is the expectation on, can it get a little scratched up? I don't fucking know. How would I know? Never heard anything about it, right? It's kind of the same deal here. Like, based on what I know of the durability of the parts, I think everything's going to be just fine. But really, I have nothing to base that on. But if possible, I think at this point, as much as I whine and cry and think maybe I'm quitting, and I was trying to take it as a sign recently when I left my ID behind. And if y'all, some of y'all missed that story, I got about 2.5 hours away and realized that I'd left my ID. And fortunately, I called the truck stop where I had spent the night and gone inside, and I think it fell out of my, I think I dropped it maybe, or I left it on the counter somehow. But I probably dropped it since I had all the other cards with my license. And I have to have it. So if it was just lost, then I would have had to go to Arkansas and get a replacement. It's a miracle I realized that, yes, I do have the other necessary documents, thankfully, but to get a replacement driver's license, but it still would have been a big pain in the ass. Uh-oh, they're commenting again. Well, and see, that's near six figures must be nice. Well, here's the thing. Number one, I don't agree with your assertion that that's near six figures. Number one, and if you just take 1,800 times 52, thank you for assuming that I would work 52 weeks. Now it's happened. I did 14 months with Snyder. But even then, I took enough time off so really, even I, who doesn't take hardly any time off, I'm not on salary. So, I don't get a paid vacation. I'm a contractor. So you're actually looking at, I would say 50 weeks if I was to, if I was to start this job and work for 12 months, because they'll let me, I can take off a week at a time if I want to. I just won't be paid. But I think I could probably get about 10 days off, but they'd want me to work probably at least 3 straight months. But I would say that that's for somebody who does what's considered one of the most important jobs, and it's safety related. I would say for somebody who works full time and is on the road away from their, if they have a life and a family, I would say 100K should be the minimum. Just my opinion. So I make less than that. I make, again, anybody can do the math. Let's call it 83,000 a year with no benefits as a contractor. Yeah, where's my other 17? Where's my other 17,000? Because Amazon is not going to go out here and do deals and say, oh yeah, well that's 83% of what we demand. So good enough, right? I would argue near six figures, just that, and I just don't agree with that. And in fact, why I would push back is six figures ain't what it used to be. What we see is that adjusted for inflation, real wages do not increase over time, period. So yeah, in 1998, six figures was a lot of money, potentially. I know when my father was making $250,000 in the mid 80s, it was, compared to now, it's a lot of money. It was a lot of money then, somewhat. At this point, 80 G's a year ain't shit. So I disagree. I'd say 80 G's a year for somebody who's doing what society would have you believe is an important job. I don't agree. That's just me. And I feel that there's, if not the intention, I feel that, previous versions of Benton, I think he would have gotten bothered by such commentary. And probably would have, while not spazzing out, I probably would have seen my potential neurodivergence and the undiagnosed fake autism would have gotten triggered. Triggered, there's the term, but certainly not triggered at this time. But it's food for thought. It's an interesting comment. I mean, there's really no need for me to take it personally, even if it was intended that way. But yeah, that's I would say that's what it's an acceptable wage. It's nothing. It's nothing to write home about. And then I didn't get to read the rest of your comments, but it seems like you were heading in the direction of air quotes normal folks. Well, I don't know. Truck driving is very much a normal folks type of job. I mean, I see these people at the truck stops. Now, the reality is that Americans have allowed the government and corporations to import foreigners who don't speak the language and come from other countries to do my job. So clearly that shows what America thinks of truck driving. So from the perspective of how America treats truckers, you're right. I should thank my lucky stars for $1,800 a week. So if you frame it that way, I would agree. Yeah, absolutely. The fact that Americans on some level prefer that somebody from another country who might very well end the lives of their purported loved ones. I mean, you can imagine, I think we all saw the video of that guy busting that U-turn on the Florida Turnpike there, or a turnpike in Florida. And then, you can see his face. And of course, this has to be a psyop on some level, but you can see the guy's face, like as the, the 80s or 90s, the old design, certainly not very good in a crash. This somewhat old design of a van just crashes at speed into the side of this trailer, and 3 folks lose their lives, right? Their so-called lives. In America, we pretend like that could be any of our loved ones, right? Which leads me to suspect that, well, how can the general public claim to have such high regard for their so-called loved ones, but simultaneously have absolutely no problem with people from foreign lands who are not qualified to drive a truck, while regular white folks like myself go through a fairly extensive program to be licensed and to meet certain qualifications in the first place, right? And then to also, be able to get the requisite experience and all of these things, and to be insurable, only to have fly-by-night outfits and, people who are brand new to the country. In fact, now we're finding out that there was people who came here on tourist visas, and the word got out, well, go to California. It's not even just California. Go to Pennsylvania, California, maybe New Jersey, Washington, New Mexico. Go to certain states, and they won't even bother to check, your visa status or whatever. Just, head on down. And then you get into how easy it can be to just, the word gets out on which DMV employees for, $1,000 or $2,000 will just go ahead and award a CDL. So now you're into not even taking a test. Just here's your CDL. Have a nice day. Right. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, been a fan of mine since the Poly Boy days. Yeah. Thanks, brother. Appreciate that. And, if I got a little froggy in my response to your comment there, that I'd have to beg your forgiveness, I suppose. I feel like I did a pretty good job of keeping my commentary measured there. So, and it's a fair point, certainly. It's a fair point. Now, part of this idea of normal folks is, I'm maintaining like an ongoing, I'm adding to this list that I call the 20,000 reasons why most people would never do this job. And in fact, this says something about the economics of America, that I would never do this job if I wasn't able to live in the truck. And in fact, one of the major factors that keeps me from quitting it and keeps me going back to it is that when I'm doing a job, I get to live in the truck. It's actually for somebody like me who's just by myself and, other than my mom and, my dad, I really don't have a family. I don't have what would be considered a life in the conventional sense. So I certainly wouldn't do this job if I couldn't live in the truck. And I would probably do it I might even do it for 1,500 a week. I mean, I have. So yeah, that's the ultimately on the money. I would say it should pay about 2,500 for what I'm doing, but I'm happy. I'm satisfied. I'm contented with the 1,800. So, and thank you for checking in. And I'll avoid going in on conservatism as a concept. There's certainly more to be gained in critiquing conservatism than in critiquing, lefties and liberals and leftism. I will make a critique, though, of Obama. Apparently, former President Barack Obama apparently recently weighed in on notions around, the out of control homeless situation in cities like, especially San Francisco, which has actually cleaned it up to some extent. In Los Angeles, which is in the process of, making the city presentable for the Olympics, the Summer Olympics in, I believe, 2028. Not even going to make it to this truck stop. It's a lot of slow going out here. But, Barack Obama weighed in and he had some specific comments around, the homeless situation. And he's basically saying, while acknowledging the plight of the homeless, he's also saying, well, it seems like things have gotten out of hand because, the proverbial mother pushing a stroller with her toddler, she should be able to go downtown and go to all of these places, right? Without, fear or worry and I think, I don't know who said it, but somebody famously said, apparently I missed it in the media, and I don't really follow the media that closely anymore, but I guess somebody made the point that, spiritually, a mother is just not going to take her children into certain environments or young children. So, what you have is that it's going to be rare that the mother's even going to be, they'll just avoid those parts of town. Well, in somewhere like Los Angeles, that ends up being like a quarter of the city is just off limits, and that ain't cool. That's not good for anybody. And so here's where I'll be a little critical on conservatives, but I'll simultaneously critique the left. So Obama makes these comments, and then Adam Carolla, who I've been a big fan of historically, and he fell off for a while, but he seems to be making a resurgence. I think he's starting to get his mojo back, and he's getting older. But that divorce, you could tell his divorce really took a lot out of him. But he said, well, basically all Obama's doing is like he's good at talking, so he's sort of in a calm, slow, deliberate manner. He's describing the problem, but he's not, offering any solutions. And for somebody who's studied collectivism and communism to some extent, who's read the lefty playbook, Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, well, and Obama certainly is familiar with that material. It's right there in Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. It says, when the opposition points out a problem, right? What you want to do is you want to immediately make them offer the solution, and then you want to attack the solution. So strategically, Obama, in recognizing that there's a problem, he understands strategically not to offer a solution. Now, political pundits, those who, are sort of, what do they call these, wonks? A wonk would say, well, actually, Obama is an astute politician, and he's signaling that the Democratic Party is probably shifting to where it's going to be more tolerant of crackdowns on the homeless, crackdowns on criminals, and it's actually, in my opinion, people do themselves a great disservice by just assuming that Democrats are always soft on crime and homelessness. That's not the case. They are at times in certain climates. It's not across the board. In fact, both Clintons, because it was Bill Clinton was the president, but Hillary was kind of we see now she was kind of sort of the president in the way that Dick Cheney was kind of sort of the president. And, Bill, something happened to Bill when he was governor of Arkansas, and it was partially responsible for, he got defeated. He was a one-term governor initially, and got defeated. And then he more or less said that, him and Hillary got together and said, we will never, ever again lose because we're viewed as soft on crime. And remember, Hillary was talking about super predators. And, Arkansas, while Clinton was governor of Arkansas, in Little Rock, the sheriff, now some will say, well, the governor can't really necessarily tell the sheriff how to do, how to police the county, but that is a political office, sheriff. And Arkansas had a famous sheriff in Pulaski County where, the governor's mansion is, Little Rock, the capital, where there was like this epidemic of, and you can look this up. There's really not any YouTube videos, but there are news articles about this in the 90s. And people have forgotten that the early 90s was like the peak of violent crime in this country. And there was a bunch of armed robberies in Little Rock. And this is, I really like being from Arkansas. This is one of the reasons, because Tommy Robinson went on the fucking nightly news and said, all right, we've had enough of these armed robberies. What I'm going to do is some of these stores, we're going to have a deputy in the back behind two-way glass with a shotgun. And if he's there when somebody comes in to rob the place, he's going to exit the back room, and he is going to shotgun to death whoever the robber is. And it happened, and it happened again. And the community, if we're calling it that, because there is a certain demographic back then that was engaging in such behavior, and they knocked it the fuck off. It worked. So this is kind of what I mean by tough on crime. So that's a thing, right? And Arkansans love that shit. And to this day, some of the most insane police chases you'll ever see come out of the state of Arkansas. And there's only one way that's able to happen. And that's when the populace is in favor of, if some really bad shit happens while the popo is chasing the bad guys, Arkansas culture is, well, they shouldn't have ran. It's like, okay, well, and nobody has any sympathy for whoever's fleeing. And it is interesting to watch. We were holding pretty steady at 11, and then 11 concurrent viewers, and now we dropped down to 6, back up to 7 after seemingly praising the Democratic Party. And that's not the point of my commentary. The point of my commentary is I'm in some way calling Obama a communist, actually, while recognizing, hopefully, the folks can recognize that while he was the president, he was a moderate, just like Clinton was a moderate. And Obama actually has moved way farther to the left after his 2 terms presidency. And while president, Joe Biden was way more lefty as far as the administration. That administration was way more to the left than Obama, who was a moderate for that climate, like it or not. And I'm not sure folks really know the difference. And I would encourage people I would encourage people not to be involved with thinking about politics. But, the reality is for many folks, they're going to be, talking to people, they're going to be interacting with people who, get into politics. And I would encourage people to recognize that when you hear, well, one side or the other, and it's this idea that, well, half the country this and half the country that. It's a third of the country. A third of the country votes Democrat and a third of the country votes Republican. And say, what do you mean? Well, that's because a third of the country don't fucking vote. That's what I mean. So of the eligible population, when we say, well, half the country voted this way or that way, no, they didn't. A third of the country voted that way. Not half. It's never half. Now, the only time it's half was, George W. Bush, fucking something extenuating circumstances. And then not even W. That's a bad example because those were both of those elections were close, supposedly. Again, official fiction. And I understand a lot of the audience hates my political takes, but I don't know. They're pretty good. They're pretty good takes. Clearly. They're not bad. But anyway, here's how smart communists are. Saul Alinsky's rule is dedicated to Lucifer, thus guaranteeing that no traditional family values MAGA conservative would ever read it. And so it's like, all right, well, now the commies have their method of, the radical leftist collectivists, the Marxists. Now they have a mechanism to disseminate their playbook without fear of the so-called enemy reading it. And so even Corolla being confused by that, and I know that's a long way around to make a point, but, Corolla finding that confusing. It's like, I'm confused. Why are you confused, Corolla? Not known as a big reader, but, why can't he figure it the fuck out? And, America has been undergoing what I would refer to as a Marxist or a collectivist or a communist revolution, probably predating the 1960s. I would say the entire post-war period, in my opinion, there's been layers of that are representative of communist revolution, but not a full-blown, overt, above board, where America becomes recognized as a communist country. Not that, but elements and fully fomented layers of communism and collectivism and Marxism. And in fact, it seemingly increases over time, based on what I'm seeing. without ever actually, turning into USSR or Cuba or. I'm not even sure China is really even a good example of that. They seem to be more of a mishmash than just straight up commies. I mean, do people really think of a Chinese person as a communist? Because in the '80s we really did, and before that we really did think of Russians as commies. Does anybody really think of a Chinese person as a communist? I don't really think so. How many Russians? How many Russians were there? Back in how many Russians were there back in the day working in America, and compared to how many Chinese are in America working nowadays in tech, and do Americans look at them as communists, right? Yeah, I don't think so. I think a Russian in the '80s and '90s would have been, especially with the Cold War propaganda, I think they would have been viewed. There would have been more of a connotation of communism. And that's one of the first things, if anybody's ever read Solzhenitsyn's um, The Gulag Archipelago, is, very early on in the book, he acknowledges that, he ended up in a forced labor camp as a political prisoner in Soviet Russia, and that he and everybody else that was in the camp, it was almost all like people who believed in communism and wanted communism and viewed communism as desirable on some level, and still, somewhat participated in and continued to defend, communism, right? Like that was a thing, back in the day over there. Versus, did your average Chinese, that seems to be more of a nationalistic thing than just a communist party type of thing, as far as I can tell. And it's debatable, but that's the way I see it. And I don't even know. I don't really know enough about it. I'm not that well educated. I know little to nothing about China as a country, actually. I mean, yapping for 55 minutes. How about that? And so back to the idea of this, near six figures that I'm supposedly making. You know, well, what about the fact that I work? I probably average. I'm just going to guess. I would say I average about 85 hours a week working. Say I work about 85 hours a week. And so the hilarious part is what you're calling near six figures is the state minimum wage in the state in which the trucking company is headquartered or based out of. And if a week goes by where I work 93 hours in a pay period, because I'm paid weekly, then that would be if you do time and a half, which is the law, for every hour over 40 hours, then if I work 93 hours, I'm now making less than minimum wage. So America has gotten to the point where someone hears what I earn driving a truck and refers to it as near six figures. And then how do you reconcile that with the reality that based on the amount of hours that I work, I just barely make minimum wage. Barely. I barely make minimum wage. And some weeks make less than minimum wage. How is that even possible? You know? And so when the company wants to sort of tout this idea that they've got this, because there's really not very many companies that have an $1,800 a week guarantee. You know, there's some that claim that, and it's a fucking scam. But if I'm on the road 7 days, I get $1,800. That's how that goes, or more. It's been more at times. But then, based on the hours worked, it's pretty fucking close to minimum wage. Like, what the hell's going on here, man? And am I the only one that notices these things? I mean, maybe so. Maybe I am. Well, the pressure's off. I ran half the audience off. I just got to figure out how to get rid of the rest of you. I will say I do enjoy my early morning stream, because lately, if I only go for like an hour and a half, we're not cracking five. It's like it's 1, 2, or maybe 3. And this morning it was the 0 for significant portions of the stream. I had no listeners. And I don't want to overtly do anything to run off 5 folks here, but 4 of you. We seem to have a couple of people that pretty much no matter what listen to me if they're available. And good on them. And so my plan, it's not a plan. My rough plan is to keep on trucking and then figure out how to extricate myself before the summer, right? Because it could take a couple of weeks. Now, most jobs I would never give a notice, but hilariously, this job, there's really not a terminal, and I don't have a car, so I guess hypothetically I could just drop the rig off at the company shop where there's not really even space to park it, and it's not secured parking. It would just be parked on the street somewhere near the shop, and that ain't really cool. And then, here's where I will sort of critique the conservatives a little bit, just based on this comment. And, if anybody gets offended, it's not really my concern at this point. All I would say is I'm not saying this to offend anybody, but, the must be nice, near 6 figures must be nice. Look, man, under capitalism, I'm doing a job and I'm earning this money, and I don't. Where's the must be nice part? As far as I know, anybody who's got a clean driving record and can pass a background check and is able to learn the skills of a truck driver can go do this job. Now it'll probably take them a few years to be able to earn the amount of money I'm earning, but I mean, I'm a little confused by the must be nice part. What do you mean? As if somebody just plucked me out of, as if I was just sort of plucked out of my own reverie and just sort of dropped into the the warm lap of truck driving, right? Like and I won't say that I resent that. It's just must be nice, like, huh? I I took my happy. Here's how I went into truck driving. I was homeless by choice, and I don't know that it matters, but and had been traveling the country, sleeping rough for about 6 consecutive years, and finally had enough of the meth heads. And I was in Austin, Texas, and I took my happy ass to the Salvation Army and checked myself into a homeless shelter where no bed is guaranteed. And in order to, I think they give you 90 days, or they did back then. And in order to keep my bed once a week, I was required as a grown ass man to meet with a caseworker or a case manager. And the first time I met with him, he said, "Do you want a job?" And I said, "That's funny because usually I don't, but in this case, yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, sure. What do you got?" And he wasn't really, he was good. He was well meaning. He wasn't able to hook me up with a job, but um, he then said, "All right, well, maybe we can do something there." He said, "What about job training?" I said, and I said, "Aha, yeah, I want to get my CDL and drive a truck or a city bus." He said, "Well, we got a Goodwill case manager. He's here every Wednesday, I think it was, and I can get you an appointment with him, and they offer." If you can go, you have to meet the qualifications and jump through a bunch of hoops, and you can get your CDL with no cost to you. And I said, "Well, all right, sounds good to me." And eventually persisted and pushed through many obstacles, and eventually got my CDL. Goodwill paid for it. And there was even hilarious, surreal moments where I was required to attend a one-on-one course of me and some guy in his 20s, who I guess probably had some sort of degree in social work or I don't know what, but nice, decent fella, nothing against him. But, I've had actual, like, white collar office type jobs. And, now I'm having to go through courses where he's like literally teaching me how to make a resume. And, now I have to make like a mock resume, and I didn't, and so the must be nice side of things. Well, isn't that the same thing where my reaction to that could have been, well, hey, buddy, I was making resumes before you were, like, literally before you were born. And, you know, I know how to, I went to college. I could teach this class. Or, did I want my CDL paid for and not have to be contractually obligated to work for a company for a period of time, in exchange for free CDL training? So, was I willing to humble myself, if that's the proper term, and to say, yeah, absolutely. I'm in half of that, as I talked about, with the guy running the course. He said, "Look, man, more or less, we took one look at each other, and he was like, okay, this guy's been to college. He knows the drill." And he was just like, "Look, obviously this is not going to be a problem for you. And, this is how I make my bread." But then half of this is Goodwill wants to make sure that you're serious before they spend $3,500. That's non-refundable. And we, Goodwill's figured out that if somebody's willing to go through a week of this and show up on time and actually sit there and do a mock interview. I did a mock interview with the whole thing. Some people this would be considered demeaning in a way, and I didn't take it as that, but certainly wouldn't have. And now they it is something they offer, right? Like if some people need that level of instruction and training, and that would, if I didn't already know how to do all of those things, it would be a benefit. But meanwhile, I'm not going into, part of me going into trucking was I don't ever want to make a resume ever again for the rest of my life. Like, I'd like to think I'm done with that. So, and I had to do another week of some bullshit, and I don't even remember what it was a week with him, and then it was a week doing, can't even remember what. And then it was 4 weeks of CDL school. And then at a certain point, my Goodwill case manager was going through some sort of personal crisis, and he's clearly having, I don't know, I think he was severely depressed maybe. And at a certain point, when I kept not getting placed into the course and he kept trying to reassure me that I was going to be in the next class, I said, listen, man, after like the third time of that, I said, look, man, I'm going to say this to you. I hope you'll take this in the spirit in which it's intended. I said, hey, man, I don't know what you got going on. It's none of my business. I'm not really the one to talk to anyway, but there's clearly something going on in your life. And what I'm going to do is, if you don't put me in that next class, I'm going to find out who your boss is, and I'm going to go to them, and I'm absolutely going to tell them exactly what's happened here. And as long as you put me in that next class, none of that's going to happen. You can go right back to treating the other potential CDL students the way you're treating me. I don't give a fuck, but you're putting me in the next class, or I'm going to find out who you report to, and I'm going to go talk to them. So, ball's in your court, playa. And just talk to him just like that. And guess who was in the next class? Surprise, surprise, fucking surprise, right? We call that standing. I stood on his desk. We call that standing on a fella's desk to make your point. I metaphorically stood on his desk and made my point. And he realized that, I'm assuming he realized that, he was, going through something, and I was as humane about it as I could be, and just said, hey, man, none of my business. Not trying to get you in trouble, not mad at you, but you're going to have to put me in the next class, or this is what I'm doing. So let's do it. Let's go. I can't just have my life on hold for an indefinite period of time. And by the way, I'm living in a homeless shelter, working at the airport. I'm not, and this guy had apparently, he had been like an Austin police officer. I think maybe he had worked at the jail at a certain point. It's like, I'm like, yo, that's a jail environment, man. I don't go to jail. Like, I'm basically living in a jail to get all this done. I'm not necessarily in a big fat hurry, but at the same time, you're gonna have to you have to make this shit happen, buddy. And again, I have no vendetta. I have no beef. If the other students, if you continue to do that to them, not my problem, not my concern. Just pretty please with sugar on top. Get me in that next class. Thank you. And it worked. Never saw him again. I don't believe. Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, it's been whoever that is down there, and I don't know if the chat just disappears or does it stay frozen on the screen. I have no idea what happens. But whoever that was making those comments, you have them to thank for no chat. So that's how we handle moderation around these parts these days. Just moderate everybody. Unfortunately, it's like what's his name in Full Metal Jacket? Private Pyle gets to eat his jelly donut while the squad has to go do PT or whatever. You know, he punishes the rest of the squad, and Pyle gets to eat jelly donuts and watch them doing PT. So have fun with all of that. I'd probably do a little preaching on Jesus right now, but I don't want to. I don't want to do that in the spirit of, in the spirit of sort of rubbing somebody's nose in their own bad behavior, right? But I think I will say that what I think is probably going to happen when I do most likely exit, and look, I'm fully capable of just sweating it out in the summer in a truck, and I'd prefer not to. But I think what's likely to happen, although it's no guarantee, and I've certainly shot my mouth off at times only to backpedal, but I could see myself out of this job by July the 1st if it's up to me, and then have whatever money I've saved. And I could see a transition to a full on Christ style, um, no more accruing tax liability, no more working a job, and no more handling of money. What do you think of that? Now, Christ apparently got around the not handling money by was it Simon Peter? I forget which. One of his followers, one of Christ's followers, kept the coin purse apparently. So I could see, and I don't even mean me having followers. I mean some version of transitioning away from the handling of money, if not in its entirety, at least limiting it to the greatest extent possible. Because I would say that it's looking to me like there's even more spiritual level ups to be had in the near future, and even with the major accomplishment of true knowledge of self / self realization, the resurrection of the risen ascended Christ within, that's a thing certainly, but even beyond that, um, more fasting, I would say, probably. Um, more preaching, or maybe to say, I still preach. I've never not preached here and there. Um, I've been doing that more or less my whole life on some level. And, um, maybe some teaching if that's appropriate. We'll see. I don't know about the casting out of demons. I've only ever, as far as I can tell, I've only ever evicted them or exorcised them out of my own, dead flesh. I don't know that that's going to be a thing because, part of the way that the Bible talks about to recognize the followers of Christ, well, again, follower would not be the proper terminology because Christ in the Bible said, well, I no longer call you servant, I call you friend. And I'll go ahead and take up that mantle of friend rather than servant. So I don't know that follower would be worshiper and object of worship contained within the same space, actually. By, for, and with. By, for, and with the meaning and power in the name of the Lord Christ Jesus. How about that? By, for, and with the power and the meaning in the name of the Lord Christ Jesus. Jesus Christ is Lord. And if somebody says that and can't immediately answer, Lord of what exactly? Because I know exactly what Christ is Lord of, and that's my internal space, right? My own, and again, within the context of delusion, individuated beingness, which isn't even possible. For what I am is never not one with the most super intelligent power, source, and force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, a quickening spirit. And that's what Christ in the Bible means when asked, hey, where do we look for the kingdom, when it does arrive? And Christ said, within you, right? And then later on, as so-called Christianity has been bastardized, some of the church has tried to say, oh, well, it turns out that's a mistranslation. And it's actually supposed to mean among us. Yeah, sure it's not. And that and other reasons is why old Benton I'm a KJV only type of bozo. KJV only. Shout out to one of my few homeless friends, Alan Houston from Lubbock, Texas, who was raised Pentecostal. Unfortunately, he fell into methamphetamine abuse and other states of sin. Not when I met him. He was mainly suffering from mental illness when I met him. But we got to talking about the Bible and religion, and he mentioned reading the Bible, and he's talked about being raised Pentecostal, and then he's talked about how he reads the Bible, but it has to be the KJV. I said, man, I agree with you on that. I said, I'm a KJV only type of fellow myself. And, and I was already in that vein, but, I certainly have, further committed to King James Version only. And you can say what you will about King James the man. I'm talking about the translation. Talking about a Bible translation. Talking about a Bible translation. It's a bit of a shoehorn there. We can talk about Generation X, which is a curious phenomenon, certainly. Generation X. And the idea of the latchkey kids, I missed all of that because of we didn't have a lot of that when and where I grew up. And, I caught the tail end of, I'm born in 75. So I caught the tail end of what I would say is solidly Generation X. Then they get into this idea of the Zennials. So my middle sister would be considered Zennial. and XENNIAL. And then my baby sister would have been the very beginning of millennial, to my understanding anyway. Wait a minute, that looks like the popo. Pretty bad when I want to take a leak, but I won't pull into the. It's not the popo, but I won't pull into the rest area / way station just in case. Yeah, that's not the popo, but that one SUV looked close enough. So that's how good they got me trained out here. Can't even pull into the way station to take a piss. Fears of inspection. Not that I have anything to fear, but I guess fear is not the proper term in that context. But yeah, definitely my baby sister is certainly not. She's you can tell she ain't the same generation as me and my middle sister. And then I would say there's definitely some differences between my middle sister and myself. So I'm probably the only true actual Gen Xer. And then she is, but then in that sort of crossover Zennial type of way. Although she might disagree, and if she did, that'd be fine. I actually had a dream about her and my nephew last night, or the night before. I think maybe that was last night. Yeah, that was well, this morning. It's kind of interesting. Or they were in my dream. I don't know that the dream was about them. They were in it. Yep, snow expected Sunday AM. Okay. Well, see those signs I saw said Monday PM. I'm sorry, Sunday PM. So now the farther east I go, it's starting to say. So I might be wrong because I was pushing back a little bit when my dispatcher said you need to get. He basically said you need to get the fuck out of there on account of the snow. So he seems to think it's going to originate, supposedly originating in the Great Lakes area. So, of course, I'm driving right. I'm probably going to go south of that, but not too far south because I don't like that Indiana Turnpike. Although, yeah, I'm not doing the Indiana Toll Road. I'm not a fan. Not a fan. Binghamton. When I was running reefer, I remember they sent me upstate to pick up a load, and I didn't have any load bars, and they sent me to a truck stop. The shipper sent me to a truck stop like 10 miles away, and I knew based on the name of it and them being a mom and pop. I looked at the little slip of paper they gave me. I thought to myself, they're not going to have any fucking load bars. They're going to be out. They're going to carry them normally, and they're going to be out. I got there, sure enough, no load bars, and I had to go all the way to Binghamton for load bars. And I came back, and the guy didn't really even notice that I was gone for so long. But the idea of load bars came up. I said, "Yeah, something I suspected about that mom and pop. They're out of load bars." He was like, he's acting all surprised, and I said, "Yeah, I had to go to Binghamton." He said, "You went all the way?" I said, yeah. He said, "You went all the way to Binghamton?" Yeah, went all the way to Binghamton. It was about an hour and 15 minutes from where I was at, probably one way. That's a good. Well, by the time you get into whatever amount of time I wasted at the mom and pop, yeah, it's probably close to an hour each way drive. Yeah, I went to Binghamton. Thanks for that, but whatever. I mean, it is what it is. Man, I need to go to the bathroom. And back to what I talked about at the start of the stream about this one particular customer and securing the freight and all of these, you know. And meanwhile, remember when I wasn't on a day rate, I just wouldn't have got paid. I'd be doing work for free. I don't make any extra money for doing all that type of stuff. That's just, I'm expected to just do all of that. But since I'm on a day rate, I guess it's all included. But what they probably should do is the account manager should have to get on the phone, especially if it's a weekend, because there's nobody at the place on the weekend. So I think the new drivers, the new to the company drivers, and if it's the weekend, I think they should have, whoever the driver is should have to get on a call with the account manager, and he should have to instruct them and walk them through and, take pictures of everything, take pictures of the freight, send the pictures so he can say, okay, I need you to put a strap here and, kind of walk us through how to do it. But as we know, these people work mostly Monday through Friday, and, they are available on the weekends to some extent, and some drivers they'll quit over something like that. They're like, I'm not doing all this extra work. Fuck you. So, part of it is we're kind of trying to, we're trying to meet the needs of the customer while simultaneously, you know, not annoying the driver enough that they quit. Meanwhile, there's industry-wide extremely high turnover anyway. So, I mean, on some level, what's the fucking difference? And now with the seeming crackdown on the bad foreign actors and the fly-by-night companies around, especially CDL licensing and electronic logs plays a part as well. Because apparently certain platforms are quite easily hackable. Here's a little wide spot. Oh, no, somebody's merging. Oh, well. There was a wide spot on the other side of the on-ramp, but if I see even one car coming up at that on-ramp, it's not safe to try to cross over and abort the mission. I probably, I could have made it technically, but it's just not worth the potential hazards. It's all part of being a good driver, making proper decisions. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. It's all perfectly goddamn delightful, to be sure. Three more hours. Old Benton will be parked. A little over 3 hours. That's what I'm looking forward to. Not looking forward to having to wait till 6 a.m. tomorrow to start my shift. Not a fan of that, but it happens. And I've been blowing and going on my preferred schedule for, I don't know, probably close to 6 weeks now. So that's a blessing. It's been a blessing. All right, where do we stop? There's got to be somewhere to stop. Oh, is that a rest area up ahead? Well, I do believe it is. Can we hold it until, let's see, I'm guessing 12 miles. Oh, only 8.5. Good deal. It is interesting to get accused of extortion for motivating a grown man to do his job that he's receiving um, charitable funds to do his, you know, the guy probably made 60,000 a year, like no bullshit. And to get accused, right? But as we know, this realm will always treat what I am as if it's guilty. But what I would say is, did you talk to the criminal? Now, it's one thing to treat Benton as if his blessing and endowment was in fact a curse or representative of guilt of something. Well, it turns out what I am can never be adjudicated as guilty. And this world of death and game of lies contains no possibility of justice. It only knows justice based on the lack of justice. Isn't that interesting? The lack of justice. I think I'm going to have some dark chocolate if I can find it when I stop. And I don't think it's supposed to snow on us any tonight, but it shouldn't be a big deal if it does. I wonder what Chicago's supposed to get. I need to check the weather real quick. Chicago. Oh yeah. Not a very high chance though. Just yeah, I'm still pretty confident that I could have taken my 10-hour break, rolled out about midnight, and been just fine. But I do understand the abundance of caution side of things. You see, this doesn't say for Chicago. This doesn't say anything about potential accumulation. Yeah, I'm not really sure about Wisconsin. The Wisconsin side of things. My eyeballs are floating. There's a feller with a snowplow on his pick 'em up truck. In an actual truck. Just I mean, by that I mean regular cab. So I talked about before that I'm not a fan of pickup trucks, and that's not true. I do like pickup trucks. A regular cab pickup truck, a proper pickup truck with a usable bed. The hell we need with an extended cab, crew cab. That's a bunch of nonsense. It's a bunch of nonsense. if I had any reason to have a truck to pick up, I wouldn't mind a Toyota T100 long bed regular cab. Uh, Two-wheel drive's fine. I don't know that they made a four-wheel drive. I guess I'd probably want the manual, although the automatic would be fine. But I actually probably prefer the automatic at this point. On that truck, I think either one would be fine, actually. Avoid unnecessary travel. Snow expected Sunday a.m. Yeah. Earlier today in a different area, it said It said the same exact message, but it said Sunday p.m. Now, whether it now says a.m. because I've headed farther west towards where the weather's supposedly originating, maybe that accounts for it. I don't know, but or the forecast is being revised potentially. Still toying with the idea of the oil field. I could certainly work out there in the summer. Oh shit! I'm about to miss this. Oh no, I'm not. Got a mile. I was about to say I'm about to miss this damn rest area. No, I'm not. Elevation 1,200 feet. Wow. Hmm. I had some yesterday. It made me sleepy though. No sugar. I do the sugarless. That is the fucking popo. Or is it? No. Why does every damn car look like a cop car from a distance? Am I hallucinating or what? That one is more the color of the car. It looks like a state trooper. Mine's playing tricks on me, perhaps. All right, folks. BRB. I've already driven 2 hours. Goodness gracious. What is going on? I'll take it.
Now, can we get there on our 14 without having to do a split break? Maybe. And I already had some dark chocolate open, and I don't know what the heck I did with it. And man, last night, that's the first time in a long time I've drove my shift, and then, I parked at the truck stop and just immediately went to sleep. And I don't mean like laid down and fell asleep. I mean, it was just like, fuck this, I'm going to bed. And was just out. And woke up, I don't know, 4.5 hours later or whatever. Went back to sleep. Good times.
Probably need to pour out these pee jugs, but I ain't fucking with it right now.
But I'm gonna go ahead and I guess open a new chocolate. Oh, there it is. Never mind. I found it. I found the dark chocolate. Good deal. I still had half of one left. This is Whole Foods. Was they were out of the kind I usually get, and so I got some of their 100% for baking. I'm not a huge fan, but better than nothing. Where y'all going, man? Get back here. I'm joking. You don't tell me what to do. Fair enough. Yeah. Phone's running out of charge here. All right. Here we go. Back on the road. Shout out to Theo Bromine in the dark chocolate. Oh yeah. All right. Well, I got the yapping out of me.